Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fred McClure, and on behalf of President and Mrs. Bush and the George Bush Presidential Library Foundation, welcome to our event this evening. We have a very special event that centers around a part of the life of the President and a part of the life of one of those individuals who had the great privilege of serving with our President, the 41st of the United States. I would like to, however, before I begin, note that we have some special guests this evening. We have the President's Chief of Staff, Ms. Jean Becker. We have Dean Andrew Card and his wife, Reverend Kathleen Card. You're loved, man. We have Warren Finch, the Executive Director of the Library and Museum. I'm now happy that my spouse here is now here, Harriet, and we're welcome to have her here. In addition, this is a special weekend for another couple of reasons. One, it is the weekend that we are having a meeting of the George Bush Library Advisory Council, a group of individuals who served with the President and Mrs. Bush throughout their many years of public service and are here for the express purpose of continuing to build on the great legacies and examples that they provide for us and those of us who believe in the importance of public service. We also have with us the co-author, co-playwright, if you will, of this evening's presentation of Empire's Fall, Professor Robert Lawson. We have our First Lady of Texas A&M, Dr. Karen Lofton, who is with us this evening, and another good friend and a member of the George Bush School Advisory Council, Ambassador Eduardo Aguirre. Thank you, Eduardo, for being here. And we've got folks from the Department of Performance Studies, which is how we have merged these worlds of the George Bush world with the Texas A&M world here this evening. And on top of that, there are about 125, I believe, prospective students for the Bush School that are here on interviews and learning activities this weekend. So it's great to have all of you here. You're going to find out that we do this kind of stuff every weekend. So if you come to the George Bush Center here, we'll expose you to some really great opportunities. And on top of that, we've got people watching live streaming of the performance tonight, and in addition, a special group, folks at Franklin Pierce University. So let's take Franklin Pierce University and merge that with the Marlin Fitzwater Center for Communication, and we start talking about sort of like the guy who helped bring this all together. 6 years he served as the official spokesman for the President of the United States. In fact, 2 of them he did. Born in Salina, Kansas, grew up in Abilene, graduate of K-State University. He received, after his significant government service, the second highest award given in our nation to our civilian public service servants, the Presidential Citizens Medal. He stood by presidents at Cold War summits, at economic downturns, and also during military conflict. Marlin and I sort of shared this time together when we were at the White House because we both sort of had our own little constituents that we had to worry about the care and feeding of. I had 535 members of Congress, all of whom thought they ought to be president. Marlin had the entire press corps of the United States and indeed internationally that he had to deal with. And I distinctly remember one evening in October of 1990, we were actually the president was about to follow through on a veto threat having to do with some budget expenditures, in fact, taxes, if you will. And the president went through with his veto, and as a result, we had to shut down the government. And Marlin came up to my office, plopped down on my couch, and he goes, "Fred, why do we do this? I'm about to go tell the people of the United States of America that we're going to shut down the government. This ain't fun sometimes." But you know, we had some really wonderful experiences working for the president, and it is my great pleasure to introduce to you my friend and a great public servant, Marlin Fitzwater. Marlin?
President and Mrs. Bush, it's great to see you both. Mr. President, I think on behalf of at least 800 million people around the world, it's great to see you, and you look terrific. I want to introduce the play tonight with just a few words. On November 9th, 1989, the wall that divided the city of Berlin and East and West Germany and the superpower interests of the United States and the Soviet Union came down. It was no longer sustainable, and its fall represented the end of the Cold War. 1 month later, General Secretary Gorbachev and President George Herbert Walker Bush met in Malta to consider the future. Would the Soviets move to restore power? Would the U.S. move to take advantage of a diminished Soviet Union? On Air Force One, heading to Malta meeting, President Bush reviewed the 17-point plan he intended to present to Gorbachev. It invited Gorbachev to sit in on meetings of the Western industrialized nations. It offered the Soviets a pathway to participation in the world economy. Time and again, the President said to his advisors, "Can't we make this stronger? If we offer more trade, let's make it real. If we want to help Gorbachev, let's do it." And then he asked Secretary of State Baker, "Can I go first in this meeting?" The President wanted Gorbachev to know from the beginning exactly where we were coming from. When President Bush finished, there was total silence in the room. The General Secretary of the Soviet Union looked down at the table. Then he looked up to catch the President's eye. Slowly and directly he said, "That's exactly what I needed to hear." And a new East-West relationship was started. From 1988 until the end of the Soviet Union, on December 24, 1991, the two leaders met at least 9 times, exchanged 20 phone calls, 14 memos, 35 letters, and 15 cables. And they became good friends in the process of German reunification, the Mideast Peace Conference in Madrid, the liberation of Kuwait, and independence for Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and other Eastern Bloc countries. Empire's Fall is a story of a personal diplomacy and a personal friendship in the midst of turmoil and revolution. I hope you enjoy Empire's Fall tonight in one act. Thank you.
News. A variety of reporters and voices have collapsed. January 1989.
Tonight's lead story, that the Soviet Union would allow the Brezhnev Doctrine to be abandoned, to allow the Warsaw Pact nations to determine their own internal affairs, may have broad implications on the very survival of the communist system of government.
I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Then Reagan said, if the U.S. were attacked from outer space, would you help us?
To the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution.
I said, absolutely. And he said, we too.
We are at the end of one era and the beginning of another.
And that it was, the beginning of the end of the Cold War.
February 1989.
The first GPS satellite has been placed into orbit, initiating a complete mapping of the planet as the Iranian government has placed a death threat on the author of the Satanic Verses. As the vehicles leaving Kabul, heading north towards the Soviet border, indicate that
the occupation of Afghanistan has become a bleeding wound.
And the Polish government of General Jaruzelski begins to talk with Lech Wałęsa in the Solidarity Trade.
The totalitarian era is passing. Its old ideas blown away like the leaves of an ancient, lifeless tree.
I'm doing this because there's revolution taking place in my country.
America is never wholly herself unless she's engaged in high moral principle. We as a people have such a purpose today.
They all applauded me in 1986, and now they don't like it so much.
March 1989.
April 1989.
It's gonna be revolution, nonetheless.
We know what works. Freedom works.
Relief convoys moving to Kabul. In Tiananmen Square.
We know what's right. Freedom is right.
May, June, July 1989.
As soldiers dismantle the barbed wire that separates Austria
As
from
the
Hungary.
Voyager space probe passes Neptune.
We know how to secure a more just and prosperous life for man on earth.
August 1989.
In Poland, a coalition government has been formed, led by the trade union Solidarity.
Free elections and the exercise of free will, unhampered by the state.
If not me, who? If not now, When?
October 1989.
Shift to realism. George H.W. Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev enter, heading towards their respective desks. James A. Baker III and aides enter with purpose. Baker speaks with Bush, and one of the aides switches on the TV. Same on the Soviet side as Yevgeny speaks with his aides, and they join Gorbachev.
Andrei Gromyko is...
P. Newton
Salvador Dali is dead.
And more than 2 million people in Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia link hands to form an unbroken 400-mile-long human chain in protest of Soviet
And as
rule.
1 million people march through East Berlin, declares democracy.
And Erich Honecker stepped
And the
down.
government of East Germany resigned.
The wall.
The Berlin Wall. And the wall came tumbling down.
Bush looks direct to Gorbachev.
Look, this guy is perestroika.
Future generations may well point to this night and say, November 9th, 1989 was the night the Cold War ended. Borders have been opened wide. What can I say? It's a party here.
Crowds cheering are heard in the report. Yevgeny, later one of the leaders of the failed coup, speaks to the Soviet aides.
It is very interesting, the strategy of our comrade Gorbachev. I reminded the balloonist who poked a hole in his balloon in order to descend gradually, but quickly realized that a hole is easy to make and not so easy to stop back up. They say his landing made a lovely pattern in the concrete.
On the other side, Marlin Fitzwater enters with a fistful of wires of his friends.
How do you want to make a statement?
What kind of statement?
People will want to know what it means. They need some assurance that the world isn't falling apart.
Those who tested the announcement this evening were waved through the wall by guards. Within a few hours, thousands descended on the cross.
Listen, Marlin, I'm not going to dance on the Berlin Wall. The last thing I want to do is brag about winning the Cold War, bringing the wall down. It won't help the people of Eastern Europe to crow about this.
I understand that, sir, but I think you have to show that we fully comprehend the historical significance
As
of...
Fitzwater confers with Bush,
History will vindicate me.
History is a construction of whomever has the authority to write it.
I don't think anyone will be able to erase what I've done so easily.
It has happened.
This is the famous Brandenburg Gate, where, tonight, citizens from both East and West Germany are dancing on top of the wall.
They're tearing the wall apart with hammers, crowbars, bare hands. Strange to say that a painted chunk of concrete has suddenly become the souvenir
For
of
Berliners, the dismantling of the wall is the symbol of one Germany.
I think it's safe to say that the wall has been breached. There's no turning back.
This is where the end begins.
The wolves are already at the door, Mr. President. Why don't we just bring the pool into the Oval Office, you stay at your desk, and the whole thing will be made dignified, very presidential.
Please, proceed, Comrade Gorbachev. Since you are the one who set all these dominoes tumbling, the floor, for the moment, is yours.
All right. When do we do that?
How about now?
I will send a strong message to my counterpart in the White House.
Who will be trumpeting victory at this moment.
To be very cautious.
But we trumpet this, it falls apart. Clear on that? Don't gloat. You and I both know that independence usually means chaos. Hardliners are still going to want to roll the tanks. And I think it'd be to our advantage if we kept Gorbachev alive, don't you?
All agree. Shall I?
By all means. Open Pandora's box.
as Fitzwater opens the door, a clutch reporter entering Bush's face. Lights, camera, microphones, the whole bit. An onslaught.
Mr. President, this is sort of a great victory for our side in the East-West battle, but you don't seem all that elated.
I'm not an emotional kind of guy.
Well, how elated are you?
I'm very pleased.
Do you think people might say you're fixating on possible glitches and missing the enormity of this momentous occasion?
The people will say all kinds of things. Just try and stop.
Senator Mitchell and Congressman Gephardt, they're saying you should go to Berlin and join the festivities.
Well, you can tell the fine senator from Maine and Congressman Gephardt I am not going to dance on the wall.
You think it's just politics, then?
What are you talking about?
Two Democrats, knee-jerk reaction, complaining about a Republican president.
If politics enters into how we do respond to this, we are dead in the water.
The question is, how do we respond?
Well, for one, I'm not going to throw gasoline on the fire, provoke the Soviet military to respond.
The question remains, how do we respond?
Look, we just need to see how things play out.
Are you referencing the Secretary Gorbachev's meeting in October with Erich Honecker?
I said if things develop in East Germany the way they seem to be going, the Soviet Union would not send in troops.
Didn't Gorbachev say that he would no longer interfere with
The
us?
trajectory of history, that is part of it. We just need to wait and see.
The fall of the Berlin Wall was not unforeseen.
Oh, so it's part of the grand plan.
It was not unforeseen. At the same time, I'm well aware of the difficulties this may cause us.
But how? And I wanted the United States to changes.
Lights, please.
The uncertainty with which the administration has responded to the current state of affairs in Germany may well reflect deeper confusions within the administration.
Representatives on both sides of the aisle are voicing frustration with the administration's tepid response to the stunning turn of events in Germany.
Which has this reporter sensing a profound uncertainty of policy coming
At that moment, reporter 1 crosses the stage. Marlin stops her.
I just want to clarify that the president's reluctant because if America gloats, it'll be resented by Gorbachev and the Soviet people. He feels everyone will recognize the triumph of Western values over the tyranny of communism. So he doesn't have to brag about it. He's thinking about the future.
Well, why didn't he say that? People all over the world are celebrating and the president acts like he's asleep.
Without waiting for a response, reporter 1 exits.
Hey, maybe I should have given him one of these.
Please, no Nixon.
On the Soviet side, dialogue continues.
I have sent a strong message to my counterpart in the White House.
And your counterpart will listen.
I believe he will.
You know this because...
Because he is sensitive to the precarious nature of our situation. The question of Germany, the fate of the Eastern Bloc. He knows these are not simple questions.
You have met him once, twice, and on this you base your...
Belief. Yes, Comrade Yanayev. I have faith in him.
Well, we shall leave you in your house of prayer, Comrade Gorbachev, with your well-founded beliefs. I, for one, am yet to be a convert.
As Yanayev exits, he is stopped by the spectacle of the Soviet aide watching TV.
And what is this?
Comrade Kasparov, sir.
The world's falling apart and you're watching a chess game? Idiot.
Пожалуйста.
Who is he up against?
The American?
Who's winning?
It's hard to say.
Indeed. You know, the beautiful thing about chess is that it's war, but in slow motion. And of course, without the blood and the tanks and the death and the etc.
Mr. General Secretary, please.
Yeah. Chess was invented in Russia, you know.
It was?
Of course, like everything else. Now go, get Mr. Yanayev a sedative.
Baklava is speaking in crowds in Winslow Square Brawl, as Gorbachev in Russia reads a telegram about the events.
For 40 years, we heard how our country was flourishing. And for 40 years, we heard how happy we were in Czechoslovakia, how we trusted our government, what bright prospects were unfolding in front of us. I assume you do not propose me for this office so that I too would lie to you.
Imagine cheers from Hubble's audience in Prague. In Washington, Bush appears on the phone. On the opposite side of the stage, Gorbachev picks up another phone.
Mr. General Secretary, I hope this call finds you well, as there have been some wild rumors here in Washington, and we've been concerned for your safety.
At the moment, things seem to be relatively stable.
Well, I hope these developments will not impede us, that we can still agree to push forward the process to live up to the hopes of the peoples of Europe.
No, we must not abandon or slow down the process.
Our country is not flourishing. The enormous creative and spiritual potential of our nation is not being used sensibly. Entire industries are producing goods that are of no interest to anyone, while we are lacking the things we need. We have contaminated the soil, the rivers, and the forests bequeathed to us by our ancestors. But the worst thing is that we live in a contaminated moral environment.
And still we need to find mutually acceptable solutions, for the wolves will be at the door.
We learned not to believe in anything, to care only about ourselves. Love, friendship, compassion, humility, forgiveness all lost their dimension. A state which calls itself a workers' state humiliates and exploits workers. And a country that once could be proud of its educational level today ranks as 72nd in the world.
We cannot run the risk of destabilizing Europe, and yet...
Armed with an arrogant and intolerant ideology, the previous regime reduced man to a force of production. Gifted people to the nuts and bolts of some monstrous, noisy, stinking machine. We know now that this machine could do no more than inexorably wear itself out. Now, once and for all, once and for all, this machine has breathed its last. Now we stand on a new threshold. But make no mistake, the best government in the world, the best president can achieve nothing on their own. We are all now responsible for democracy and for our own freedom. Perhaps, if we realize this, then all the horrors that we have inherited will fade.
December 2nd, 1989. Aboard the Crow-class cruiser Max and Gorky, James Baker enters going over notice.
The fact is the Soviet Union is in free fall. This gives us a unique opportunity to influence events. The whole question of Germany, the Baltic states...
Look, Jim, I just want to make sure that we explore the total relationship. I want a clear view of the barriers that we face, a more precise understanding of our differences.
Gorbachev wants our help without it looking like we're helping. That's a tricky dance. Not to mention, you know, NATO's nervous when we don't speak with the Soviets, nervous when we do.
I want to be clear about our positions, but lay out some ideas for helping Gorbachev, something he can bring back to his people. But hell, we're still staring at the Iron Curtain. 500,000 Soviet troops still in East Germany. We mishandle this, it could be very dangerous.
I'd like to know what he's going to lead with.
Doesn't really matter, does it? My view is you dance with whomever's on the dance floor.
We got to a conference table with the Soviet contingent already seated. Gorbachev, Shevardnadze, and a very nervous translator. Bush and Baker and their own nervous translators sitting. But even though Bush and Gorbachev both speak English for our benefit, everything they say is translated by the translators. The Soviet translator constantly murmuring in Russian to Gorbachev, the American one murmuring English to Bush. This, necessarily and purposely, will lead to a chaotic undercurrent. This whole section should feel a bit wonky.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
It is for me to welcome you. The first thing to do is note and appreciate your initiative to hold this meeting. Now that so much is happening, it is clear. We have to find a dialogue commensurate with the pace of change. Would you like to start, Mr. President?
If you don't mind.
Please, be my guest. Indeed, you are.
Fight bell sounds. Ding! Lights clamp down on the conference table.
Allow me to ask you to clarify. You expressed some reservations about Western values. I can understand if this is presented with arrogance and chauvinistic pride, but as we discuss these matters within NATO and Western Europe, there is naturally talk of Western values.
But our main principle from which we proceed is the right of each country to make its own choices.
Oh, exactly. Glasnost is a Western value. It isn't our word, but we value lively debate, pluralism, and openness. It's not hostility that Western values is used as a term, and I certainly don't want to complicate anything.
Well, the U.S. is committed to certain cultural, political, and economic choices, is it not?
Yes, but...
We are just saying, let others make their choices. The thing is to have no fear as regards any system.
Exactly.
Organic choices. Self-determination.
That's exactly what we mean by Western values. Not that there should be any specific forms that we...
But when someone says Western values, it implies he has the final truth, and you have to expect trouble.
And why should openness and pluralism be considered distinctly Western values?
Because this has been our basic foundation.
But we share those values. They are common values.
It is much more apparent that we share these values now than it was 20 years ago.
We should just use more general terms. For instance, there is great nervousness about what the reunification of Germany would mean when we say it will happen on the basis of Western values, when what we mean is openness and pluralism. Because no one wants the kind of Germany we had 50 years ago.
Some are saying it is because of Western strength that Western values even exist.
Let's try to avoid words that cause you or us concern. We are saluting these values.
So let us not make it a theological debate. That led to religious wars, and we should have learned from that.
Can we say democratic values?
Well, yes. I don't see why not.
Excellent.
I'm glad we had this conversation.
I very much wanted this discussion to take place.
Fight bell sounds. Ding! Rather like fighters, Bush and Baker rise from the table, go up and confer, as do Gorbachev and Shevardnadze.
Talks aboard the Kuril-class cruiser Maxim Gorky seem to be mired in classic diplomatic issues. What with this weather and the lack of progress, we might as well call this the sinking summit.
It's maddening, isn't it? The way the press twists things. There always has to be drama, controversy.
True, but as they say, Valko voyatia vlesny chodit. If you're afraid of wolves, don't go into the woods. Or, as your Richard Nixon said to Khrushchev, if you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen.
Yeah, please, no Nixon.
Agreed.
Fight bell sounds. Ding!
Let's put all of our cards on the table.
Good, yes.
I'm going to bring up the most contentious issue. You know what it is, and I know what it is.
Of course, yes.
Latin America. Nicaragua, Cuba, this issue of having two countries identified with the USSR, swimming against the current in Central America, is a great dividing wedge between us. A gigantic thorn in the shoe of our relationship. Look, we know that Castro is very complicated, but he's a major source of problems in the region.
And as everyone knows, Castro couldn't even go into the bathroom unless the Soviet Union put the nickel in the toilet.
Castro emerged without any assistance from us. No one can give orders to Cuba. Absolutely no one.
Well, the point is there is no military threat to Cuba that justifies you sending weapons to Castro. The best thing would be is if you gave him a signal that it would no longer be business as usual.
We don't want bridgeheads in Cuba or Central America. You must be convinced of that. And I don't see why Nicaragua is so unacceptable to you. They will have a new government after elections. Let the UN monitor it all.
Frankly, we're not that concerned with them.
This is a Cold War mentality, and we must agree that strategically and philosophically, the ideology of the Cold War is what has been defeated. The people of our countries desire to move towards each other, and at the political level, clearly we are lagging behind. We cannot rewrite history. What happened, happened. That is the privilege of history. But it is our privilege, I would go so far as to say duty, not to approach this problem as in the past, to base policies on illusions and mistakes. In that case, we are bound to fail.
And we are afraid that some people in the West think that since Eastern Europe is cracking apart, this means the Western policies of the Cold War were right.
And the only thing the U.S. has to do now is to keep the basket open and gather the fruit.
I don't agree with that.
And I am glad to see this. My friend, we are doomed to cooperate for a long time to come. And so we must abandon the vestiges of seeing one another as enemies.
Agreed.
Fight bell sounds. Ding! As before, Bush and Baker rise from the table, go off and confer, as do Shevardnadze and Gorbachev. The translators, exhausted, remain at the table.
We are all aware that the world would be a better place if perestroika succeeds. You know we have not responded provocatively. I have been called cautious and timid. I am cautious, but I am not timid. I just wanted to send you a signal by not jumping up and down on the Berlin Wall.
And I appreciate that, because this is how we will build bridges across rivers rather than parallel to them. The danger is that some are saying that the Brezhnev doctrine is being replaced with the Bush.
Absolutely not. But we are at an historic watershed, and it is our duty to analyze all that is happening and to strive not to address the situation as we have in the past. The economy, social change, yes, all of this and more is on the table, but at the top of the list, we must place cooperation. We must work together.
Отлично.
Excellent. I need to learn Russian.
Perhaps we should leave these good people to iron out the details. Besides, they must be tired of us, and we are perhaps a little tired of them as well.
You said it, pal.
Outside, the press came before attention.
Are you aware that when you announced this meeting, there were voices on both sides that said Malta, Yalta, they'll never get anything accomplished?
Well, they're all...
And are there elements in the U.S. and Soviet Union alike who would like to see perestroika fail?
Well, of course.
On the heels of the Berlin Wall and the Velvet Revolution, do you really believe the changes sweeping Eastern Europe are now an unstoppable tide?
Well, my opinion is
Don't
that
you
these
think
things...
history tells us that the chances of failure are enormous? Was there a movement on the Middle East, on Afghanistan, on Africa?
Not yet, but I can tell you that the world is leaving one epoch and entering another.
No disrespect, Mr. President, but how can you claim such a thing when there are so many issues that remain unresolved?
The Cold War, I tell you, is over.
And I assure you we will never start a hot war against the U.S.
Can we give a comment on the earthquakes in Armenia? Any thoughts about the World Chess Championship? Will there be a real summit next year?
Yes! Empires fall, Mikhail.
Indeed they do. And as always, when that happens, some will be happy, and some will not.
The scene, a landscape populated by ruins. Lightning flashes across the set, thunder booms, and there's enormous rendering sound like something being pulled out by its roots. As the cinema wall rises up, revealing an enormous statue of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, pointing towards the future. The statue teeters, then falls into the stage, shattering into pieces. There's an enormous cloud of dust, which, when it clears, reveals Lenin himself standing on top of the now empty pit, scowling. Gorbachev and Bush climb off the rubble to see what's going on, while Lenin goes to the edge of the stage majestically. The better to brood on his tragedy. Then a delivery person enters, coping with a crate on a hand truck. The crate is clearly labeled Leningrad, which has been crossed out and St. Petersburg scrawled next to it. He crosses the stage, cursing to himself without acknowledging the three men. At the edge of the stage, something falls from the crate. The delivery person's exits without caring. Bush picks up the object, holds it up. It's a small bronze bust of Lenin. Lenin himself strides over to Bush and snatches the bust out of his hand.
Oh.
You were looking for this, perhaps?
We were one short on the manifest, but no. It's fine, you can keep it.
As a reminder of who I am, was. Oh, look. Souvenir of Leningrad. How charming.
Well, goodness, this is awkward, isn't it?
No, tell me, why is this awkward?
Mr. Lenin, you've got to understand that we don't make the decisions. History makes the decisions. And speaking of history, Presidents Bush and Gorbachev, welcome.
Is he one of yours?
I thought he was yours, and I was about to say, George, surely we've moved beyond such tactics. I was about to be very disappointed.
Tell us, be honest, have we been abducted?
No, of course not.
Well then, who are you that doesn't make the rules?
Well, I'm not history, if that's what you mean. I'm a technician at the statuary. We're down the block a ways.
Statuary?
We make statues. When history decides someone or something deserves one.
This I know because I have been here before. I deserve the right to be here.
70 years ago, absolutely, yes, you did. But the fact is, we also process returns and recycle the materials more often than you might imagine.
You still have not adequately explained.
I filed a grievance. As a statuated person, I have the right to file a grievance.
Absolutely. Of course, as a once great man, you were also allowed the courage to accept the fact that at one time you made history, then it changed, and now perhaps you might consider...
Going quietly into the good night.
Gentle is actually the...
Well, sir, I will not.
Dylan Thomas, it's gentle.
I was not quiet in my life. I will not be quiet in my afterlife, or whatever the hell this is.
I assure you, your complaint has been delivered to the directorate, Mr. Lennon. They'll get to you as soon as they can. But as you can see, there's been a bit of a backlog.
Of course I can see. It's all me. Not to Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, it does not.
Oh, you can't imagine how many times I've heard that. We have warehouses filled with statues of men who've said the same. So yes, I hate to be the one to break the news, but it does happen. And even to Vladimir Ilyich Lenin.
Are we dead?
No, certainly not.
Of course not, idiot. You're busy dismantling the Soviet Union.
So where are we? We were in Camp David last I looked.
You still are in Camp David, or thereabouts.
So not dead. That's good. Because for a little while I was wondering if this might not be hell. You could maybe expedite the comrade.
Alas, there are procedures. Actually, President Gorbachev, you're heading home, and President Bush, you are heading back to Washington at this moment.
It all moves so fast, but we're not dead.
No.
But he's dead.
Only if you stop believing.
But statuation, or destatuation, as the case may be, can happen in your lifetime or not for 100 years.
But his spirit is alive.
Was. And still might be again. The truth is, some ideas die, new ones are born, things change.
Fashions change, yes, but powerful ideologies do not. Some are destroyed, yes, I will admit that, but they do not come in and out of style unless they're nothing but previously failed ideologies dressed in contemporary clothing. I created something completely new.
Actually, Marx invented it.
Yes, but the task to implement those ideas fell to me. That's why the Marxism-Leninism shared credit thing. Ah, Carl. To the philosopher and the man of action. It's a good combination. It's why we got along.
You didn't have to get along. You were a child when he was dead already. You read his books.
Collaborating with the dead can be a very satisfying experience.
I doubt as compelling as negotiating with the living. Wrestling with living ideas.
Negotiating, wrestling. I liked the old you better.
What are you talking about?
Not even Jesus Christ knows the answer to that question. That was you in your prime. Chairman of the Supreme Soviet, a prize fighter, throwing punches against the arrogant capitalist foe.
Wasn't that when I asked you how you knew that perestroika and glasnost would succeed?
Yes, and I said, not even Jesus
Christ. The context is not important. What is important is the fire you had in your gut. Then you became a patsy. That is the word, yes?
Well, you're using the right word for what you intend, but you're
patsy. I uprooted the divine right of kings that had dominated our country for centuries. You Americans, if anyone, must appreciate this.
Yes, but as far as communism is concerned, history has changed its mind.
Now, what do you know of history? America has what? A couple hundred years? It could all fall apart.
The Soviet Union has had only 72 so far, and things aren't looking so
good. What? The pharaohs had 2,000, and all they left behind was a bunch of chicken scratchings, looted pyramids, and mummified cats. We left a legacy. History, I tell you, will vindicate me.
Perhaps when history petrifies into myth.
Bastardizing doctrinal, are we? You know, if you were a good communist, you'd only quote Russians.
Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself.
Don't throw Tolstoy at me!
Gentlemen! I am sorry.
Don't apologize for me, you manian!
Union Vice President, actually.
Oh. Well.
We shift from a land of ruins to Bush and Washington and Gorbachev in the USSR and Nastasia in Crimea. Lenin remains on the sidelines and was initially speaking to the press.
What has come over in Tofts is that Mikhail Gorbachev has resigned for health reasons.
Resigned? For what?
We have little doubt that the action of the group is extra-constitutional. A very disturbing development.
Is it true that Boris Yeltsin has called for the reaffirmation of the post of the USSR President Gorbachev?
Yes.
Yeltsin is on my side?
Where is Mr. Yeltsin now?
I don't buy it. He's positioning himself.
Well, if CNN is to be believed, he's out in front of the Kremlin calling for the restoration of the legally elected organs of power. Have to give him credit for enormous guts.
Are you in contact with the leaders of the coup?
Coup?
No, we don't want to do anything that would legitimize them. Though it would certainly be interesting to see what these new leaders say. So far that they've said that Gorbachev has had health problems. Maybe that means his fingernails wouldn't come out.
Fingernails? George!
Looks like everyone's going to have to camp out for a while. We have a bit of a hurricane coming down the point.
That is an understatement.
Mr. President, regarding the footage we've seen of tanks moving through the streets of Moscow.
My God.
We cut to the press conference. This one of Yevgeny Yanev speaking to camera.
Yanev, you little rat terrier. I should have known.
A state of emergency has been declared, so we appeal to our citizens and foreign leaders to respect the situation as it has unfolded, that in view of the illness of the President of the USSR and his inability to fulfill his functions as Vice President, I shall assume his powers. We will release more information as it develops. Thank you.
Information. Peace, Duke. You warned me trouble was coming, but I couldn't believe your intelligence knew what I did not. These men, they were, I believed, supporters. Some of them, friends. Have I become blind to have been so easily betrayed? I need to get back.
Scene shifts to Washington.
I need to talk to Yeltsin.
Mr. President!
Mr. Yeltsin, I'd appreciate an update.
Gorbachev is encircled by the KGB. Absolutely no way of reaching him. Yanev and a committee of 8 have taken over and declared a state of emergency. Troops have been brought to Moscow. The Supreme Soviet is surrounded, and I expect a storming any moment. But I found that we will not leave.
Oh, this bit of drama is pure Yeltsin.
I don't want to do anything that would legitimize the traitors. Would it help if I publicly offered you my support?
Support Yeltsin?
Of course it would help. Perhaps even defend these traitors. Expel them for the toothless old fools they are.
Well, maybe under the circumstances.
I've appealed to the citizens who have massed outside to defend the legally elected government from this disgusting coup. But as you know, a wounded animal is the most dangerous thing. And yet, we will not lose hope, though they resort to the most extreme and bloody measures.
Not all coups succeed, Boris.
Boris? Chummy, chummy.
I'm happy to embrace your optimism, Mr. President. Now I must go. The tanks are approaching the Parliament building. I hope not, but this might be the last time you speak to me.
Nicely played.
Spasiba.
Gorbachev is on the phone in Crimea, talking to Bush in the Oval Office. He's also on the phone.
Oh, my dearest George, I am so happy to hear your voice again.
Mikhail, I'm glad to hear you. How are you holding up?
4 days in an armed camp. You can't believe what it was like.
Do you know where things stand?
Mr. President, the adventurers have failed. They tried to pressure me using every method, block me by sea and land, but we withstood the challenge.
Where are you now?
I'm still in the Crimea. It's been only an hour since I resumed my duties. Troops are moving out of the city, and, you know, everything we did to improve relations with the republics has paid off. All of them took positions of principle. Things like this will no longer stand.
Excellent.
Mr. President.
Yaniev has been arrested. The other plotters are coming to see me. Plead for their lives, I suppose. I can tell you what they have to offer. Nothing. Do not worry about me. It is all over. Mad. They thought they were making history. Idiots. This is not history. This is nothing but men in pursuit of their own ends.
You know your marks. Lenin would be proud of you.
The whole system is corrupt. We have to take it all apart. Every last bit of it.
You know, I started the revolution an idealist.
And so begin most revolutions. Your idealism is what I respected in you. In my youth, you were an inspiration.
Go on. Make me feel old.
You're not old, Vladimir. You're dead. But you should be proud. You were one of the most impressive socio-political theoreticians of the 20th century.
Impressive? That's like saying, it was very interesting. Everyone knows what that means.
I even found you impressive. I didn't agree with you.
Well, intelligent minds can agree to disagree on little things.
I don't consider freedom a little thing.
Oh yes, well, freedom in a capitalist society is much the way it was in the Greeks. Freedom for slave owners.
The definitions have changed, my friend. Socialism needs democracy and openness in order to survive.
Perhaps. But then this is not socialism.
Lenin picks up a handful of dust from his fallen statue.
Come in under the shadow of this rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you.
Now it's T.S. Eliot.
I know. The good communist only quotes Russians.
But an intelligent man takes wisdom wherever he can lay his hands on it.
Instinct, is it?
It is.
15 countries, 22 million square kilometers, 293 million people from the Arctic Ocean to the Afghan border. The Soviet Union was an extraordinary achievement.
Perhaps it collapsed under its own weight.
Well, I never wanted an empire. I did what I did from a position of integrity. All I wanted was a little recognition. Is that so awful?
No. But we can't control what we set in motion, or how we're remembered. All we can do is push the ship from shore, and then history will.
History does whatever it damn well pleases. However it chooses to evolve, eh? That is, I must say, a bit unnerving. And these people, who don't make the decisions, they say all they do is leave it up to the will of history, which is ultimately what? The will of the people. Why not? They are subject more often to the whims of the elite. Why should they not have the last word? The pawns. Ultimately, they rule the game. But this is how it should be, yes? And this is from a good communist. And so I bow to the will of history, misquoted, recycled as pop culture and pop art, forgotten or remembered, none too wisely and all too well.
But remembered. Perhaps this is the point.
A favor, Mikhail Sergeyevich. Put one of those little bronzes of me in the Hermitage. That nursing home for has-beens? Who knows? One day history may change its mind. It is, after all, nothing if not fickle.
Today, voters in Lithuania cast their ballots in support of independence.
First democratically elected president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, has not announced the withdrawal of troops from Kuwait.
Albania had its first multi-party
And
election.
Georgia voted for independence from the Soviet Union.
Very busy out there.
As always.
Composer Leonard Bernstein has died.
Comedy Central has been launched. The space shuttle Columbia carries Space Lab into orbit. Latvia and Estonia have voted independence from the Soviet Union. Boris Yeltsin is elected president of
And
Russia.
since the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact, the pace has been breathtaking. First, Estonia declared its independence, then Latvia, then Ukraine, and Belarus.
What did I tell you? I am a prophet.
Can I get you gentlemen some tea or coffee? A drink, perhaps?
A vodka tonic might hit the spot.
Make that two. Very light on the tonic for me. Very light. Gossamer.
Boris Yeltsin at a podium in Russia.
I call to the podium Mikhail Gorbachev to authorize the independence of the following nations: Ukraine, Armenia, Turkmenistan.
And the Madrid Peace Conference has seen the first ever U.S.-USSR cooperation on the Middle East, and the first time Arab countries sat down with Israel and decided its right to exist.
The infamous KGB has been disbanded.
Poland has held its first free election. President Mikhail Gorbachev has resigned, and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics has officially been dissolved.
So, empires fall. Statues crumble. Merry Christmas.
A peaceful transfer of power, Mikhail. Damned unusual in this or any other time. That in itself is enough to make me proud to have worked with you.
Thank you. Likewise. But you're going to have a hell of a job keeping that Yeltsin in line.
Afraid you're going to have to put a good face on that business.
Oh, I have always been the consummate actor.
Politics is not acting.
My dear George, your history is the history of grand performances. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Reagan was an actor. This was a performance.
It worked.
Maybe you're right. Well, it's a good day. Sad, too, though, that we won't get the chance to finish our work together.
You know, you're invited to our home anytime. Horseshoe Pit's always open. You'll come?
I'll try.
Do you think we should get back to it all?
Why rush? All I have to do is clean out my desk.
Zoop.
See what else is on. Maybe they get HBO. You know, I played chess with Kasparov once.
I heard. Shall we play?
Well, as they say, when in Luxembourg, do as the Luxembourgians do.
Indeed. Would you like to start?
No. It's your turn.
A chessboard appears. Bush picks up a stone from the rubble at the base of a Berlin Wall section.
Here. For your missing bishop. You're a man of rare vision, Mikhail. And guts. And God knows it takes guts to weather those who would ignore the call of history.
Well, perhaps what we have done will put us at the beginning of a long road to a lasting peace.
The prophet speaks.
Well, unfortunately, there are far more good historians than there are good prophets. So, we can only hope.
All we can do is hope.
We're fortunate to see the premiere of Empire's Fall at Ford's Theater. I think these guys did a great job. Awesome job. Thank you very much. Thank you, Department of Performance Studies, for your contribution to us. We're quite proud of you. Bob, Marlin, thank you for the work that you did to make this come together, Mr. President. Thank you for your service. I've got some little special gifts from these guys, so if you'll allow me to do that, those of you who are going to dinner afterwards, please stay in your seats. Those of you who are leaving, we're sort of like moving you out that way, and of course, we need to let the President and Mrs. Bush depart at their leisure, but you're in charge. You're in front. Yes.